Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so first there was one question that was given to me in writing. Okay, the question is, last week you mentioned that the beautiful, wholesome, resultant citas will occur after rebirth into the next life, whereas the rootless, wholesome, resultant citas can occur before rebirth. They can occur in this life. Is that sometimes or always true? Okay, Okay, first, to answer these questions, really, we have to go further in the study of the Abhidhamma, but I'll just give a very concise answer in advance, which maybe won't be clear. If it's not completely clear, don't worry. As we go through, it will become clearer. Okay, so the beautiful, wholesome, resultant citas. Okay, there's one way in which they might occur in this life, but let's say their main functions will be to occur as the mode of the rebirth consciousness in the next life. We're going to see that when we come to the functions of the citas in chapter 3. Okay, the rootless, wholesome, resultant citas the rootless, wholesome, resultant citas, those are the citas that occur as the 5 types of sense consciousness, the receiving consciousness, the 2 kinds of investigating consciousness. So those are 8 types of consciousness. Those types of consciousness will occur in this life. But in this life, they will be occurring as the result primarily of karma done in previous lives, but also on some occasions they will be occurring as the result of karma done in this life. So karma done in this life can produce its results in this life itself by way of the rootless citas, the rootless resultant citas, or the karma done in this life can produce results in a future life as the basic rebirth consciousness or as resultants that occur in a future life. But as I said, this is difficult to grasp until we come to the section on functions of consciousness in the next chapter. So I think it's better not to try to go into detail now. Okay, what factors influence the timing of the results of karma? Again, this is a rather complicated question, and we're going to be dealing with karma when we come to chapter 5. So maybe we should just wait patiently until we get to chapter 5. Okay, so sorry I can't answer in detail all the questions now because like the Abhidhamma, it's a very, what's the expression? Well, it's a complex, almost like a holographic system where all of the parts are very intricately interrelated and integrated with other parts. And so sometimes to understand one part, one has to wait until one comes to another part. Then the later section will throw light on what was brought up in the earlier part. Okay, so now let us continue with our examination of the mental factors, the chaitasikas. And if you remember, I mentioned when we started this chapter, okay, the chaitasikas, these are the factors that arise in association with the citta. So every citta arises together with a whole bundle of mental factors. The mental factors perform more specific functions than the citta itself. The citta we might think of as a kind of light that illuminates, the objective field, whereas the chaitasikas are the specific factors that perform their own more particular functions. Maybe, I'm not sure if this is a good analogy, but I'll try it anyway. I don't know what the style of showing movies now is, but back in my early days, there was the projector with a light, and then there was the film going by, which shows what's going on in the movie. Okay, so maybe we could compare the citta to the light, except citta itself is always changing. It's not like the light of the camera, of the projector, in a movie always remains stable while the film rolls by. But here the light of citta is different for each citta. But the function of the citta is just to light up the objective field, and maybe the chaitasikas could be considered the content of the little frames that make up the film. So, if we take one frame, okay, maybe it's a cowboy movie. Okay, so this is the cowboy, this is the part of the frame shows the desert. This little part of the frame shows the horse on which he's riding. Okay, so in that way you get more specific content from the chaitasikas. Okay, then there are, according to the Theravada Abhidhamma, there are 52 chaitasikas, 52 mental factors, and of these, 13 are considered the ethically variable factors. That is, these factors can change their character depending on the citta in which they arise. And so, if they arise in an unwholesome citta, they're unwholesome. If they arise in a wholesome citta, they're wholesome. If they arise in a resultant citta, they're resultants. If they arise in a functional citta, they're functional. Okay, so and then these ethically variable factors, there are 13, they're divided into two groups, the universals and the particulars. The universals are present in every citta. Every citta has them. So those are contact, feeling, perception, volition, one-pointedness, the life faculty, the mental life faculty, and attention. And I should mention the way the chaitasikas relate, if you know the sutta system of the 5 aggregates. So we have the aggregate of material form, that is matter. Then the 4 mental aggregates, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. So the chaitasika of feeling is the same as the aggregate of feeling. The chaitasika of perception is the same as the aggregate of perception. Citta represents the aggregate of consciousness. And then all the mental factors, all the other mental factors, so 50 mental factors, excluding feeling and perception, are assigned to the aggregate of mental formations. So of these 7 here, feeling goes in the feeling aggregate, perception in the perception aggregate, then the other 5 go in the aggregate of mental formations or volitional formations. And then all of the ones that follow also go in the aggregate of mental formations. Okay, so these are the 7 universals which I discussed last time. Now we come to the 6, here they're called occasionals or particulars. Okay, we could read these out loud so that we get familiar with the sound of them. So these are occasionals, pakinaka. Okay. Vitakko, vicharo, adimoko, viryam, piti, chando chati, cha ime, chetasika, pakinaka nama, evam ete te rasa, chetasika, anya samanati, veditabba. Okay, so these 6 occasional or particular mental factors are, here it's translated initial application, that's vitakka. Sustained application is vichara. Then adimoka is decision. Virya, of course, we know that's energy. Then piti, here I followed the older translation, zest. Though I don't like it, but I prefer, maybe we could call it delight, elation, rapture, even gladness. Okay, and then the 6th is desire. And so we can look at the qualities, the way these 6 occasional factors are explained in the Abhidhamma commentaries. Okay, so vitakka is explained or described as the application of the mind to the object. And so its characteristic is to direct the mind on to the object, or to lead the mind onto the object. And vitakka usually goes together with the 2nd occasional, which is in Pali vichara. This is here translated sustained application. And vichara, it's described as the continued pressure on the object in the sense of examining the object. But this is not examining the object in the way that leads to wisdom. We have to understand that this is like a very, very simple, almost you could say a primitive mental function. So in a way it's just like the looking at the object. And it's, some of the commentaries explain vichara as like rubbing the object. And so its function is to the sustained application of all the mind and all the other mental phenomena to the object, and it anchors the mind in the object. Okay, to illustrate the relationship between vitakka and vichara, the commentaries use a number of similes. And we have to remember, even similes are always somewhat unsatisfactory, but they might help us to understand the relationship. Okay, so one simile is that when you're washing the dishes, washing a dish, there's one hand is holding the dish, and the other hand you have the cloth or the sponge, and you're wiping the dish. Okay, vitakka, which directs the mind onto the object, that's like the hand holding the dish. Vichara, which examines the object or puts pressure on the object, is like the hand that's rubbing the dish to clean it. Okay, another simile that's used is that of, a compass. I don't know if they use these in school anymore. Now probably everything is done on computers. But in my old-fashioned day, we used to use a compass. It's like a device with one arm holds the pencil and the other arm has a pin or a needle, and then you press the needle into the paper, and then you take the compass with the pencil and you turn it around and it draws a near perfect circle. Okay, so vitakka is like the arm of the needle that you stick into the paper, and vichara, or sustained application, is like the arm of the compass that goes around to create the circle. Another simile that's used, which is not really completely adequate, is that of a bird taking off, sort of jumping up from the branch of a tree and then flying. So they say that the jumping up of the bird from the tree is like vitakka, and then it's moving the wings to fly is like vichara. But this is imperfect because it suggests that there's a time difference between vitakka and vichara, but almost always they occur simultaneously. It's just that they have somewhat different functions. Okay, so we come now to the third occasional mental factor. In Pali, this is called adhimokkha. In Sanskrit, it's adhimoksha. And this is what we translated here as decision. And the explanation, I have to admit I'm not so happy with this explanation, but I couldn't find a really good explanation in the commentaries. Because usually the commentaries, they just give these very brief explanations and sort of assume that you would understand the meaning from the explanation. And often I have to confess I don't understand the meaning in depth or in detail. Okay, so it said that, you see, the word adhimokkha, we have this, the base of it is mokkha, which is similar to the Sanskrit moksha, which means freedom or liberation. But adhimokkha has the more specific meaning of, literally, it's the releasing of the mind onto the object. And so it's here rendered decision or resolution. And maybe we could understand this in the sense that every citta, well, not everyone because it's not a universal, but more developed kinds of cittas make a decision about the way they're going to process the object that's confronting them. And we could see this mental factor of decision when we're faced with a decision. We go into the store to buy, maybe a tea store to buy some tea, and so we're thinking, what kind of tea should I buy? Earl Grey tea, English breakfast tea, Irish breakfast tea, Darjeeling tea. Oh, they're all so tempting, but I only have enough money to buy one packet. So what should I buy? That's a state of indecision. Then, I like the Darjeeling tea. So there maybe you could see adhimokkha has now become the prominent factor. But in just about every more advanced kind of citta has some decision. It said that even when we're like understanding something, like say listening to a discourse and trying to understand it, or reading a book trying to understand it, we're constantly making decisions, maybe decisions about how we understand what's being said, either in the lecture or in the book. And so it has the characteristic of conviction, the function of not groping, well, maybe we could say the function of not being indecisive, and it's manifested as decisiveness, which is like saying, what's a circle? It's a round, two-dimensional object, which the circumference is equidistant from the center. So not very helpful. Okay, virya or energy. I think we can all know this from personal experience. So there's physical energy or bodily energy. That is one thing. But mental energy it has the same quality of energy, but this is the energy of the mind, that energy which invigorates, I think of the word vigor, you could almost see an analogy with the word virya. So that which invigorates the mind. And here it says it has the characteristic of supporting exertion and marshalling. It's arousing the mind. And this is on the strong occasion of energy where we have some kind of ground for arousing energy. Like maybe we get up in the morning and we're drowsy and dull and drowsy. And then if as soon as we get up, we do the reflection, the meditation on death, even just for 5 minutes, that I might die today. I don't know how long my life will last. That's said to be one of the strong conditions for arousing energy. So that will invigorate the mind. Or even if you go to the sink and you splash the face with cold water, that will not only remove the drowsiness of sleep, but it will generate energy in the mind. Okay, so this is energy. Okay, then the fifth one is, here it's translated as zest, or the Pali word is piti. And so we saw this earlier as a jhana factor. And I've been using in my more recent translation, rapture. So that is the high degree of piti. But in the earlier stages, we could think of piti as kind of gladness or joy or delight, the upliftment of the mind. And so it said that it has the characteristic of endearing, or maybe I would prefer to say refreshing, because when you feel gladness, joy, delight, the mind feels refreshed. And so its function is to refresh the mind, and then also when the mind is refreshed, it has an impact on the body. Or its function is to maybe to thrill with rapture. And it's manifested as elation. So all of these little explanations are just attempts to convey some indication, even very concisely, of what is meant by these mental factors. But to really understand what's meant, it's not so much a matter of attaching to the words, but looking in one's own experience to see how these factors manifest. Maybe you could see zest on a very mundane level when maybe your birthday comes around, and then maybe you go, okay, an experience I had a few months ago, I won't mention what month. Okay, on my birthday, at the monastery, when I went to the dining hall for the breakfast, nobody said anything to me. And so I felt actually a bit of relief. But also maybe there was a little disappointment. We've had my birthday in the past there. Nobody has remembered it. Okay, but then I came up for lunch, and then I opened the door, and all the residents of the monastery and even some of my students from outside had all come with a cake and special foods prepared. So then, well, actually I want to turn around and walk back. But maybe then I felt some delight. Everybody remembered my birthday. So if you've had that experience, then you get some sense of the meaning of delight or piti. Then maybe again you could see it maybe at the mundane level. Okay, when a couple gets married and they come, the man comes from one door, the bride comes from another door, and all of their friends and relatives are around, and then they make their vows. Then they're feeling really sort of delight in their mind, and everybody is congratulating them. So that is a kind of mundane type of piti. But there are more spiritual kinds, like especially, or one example is if we're doing the recollection of the qualities of the Buddha, either in the Pali way, we use the 9 qualities, or the Chinese Mahayana way of recollecting Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amitabha, then sort of visualizing the Buddha and reciting the Buddha's qualities or name over and over. Then when the mind starts to settle on that, then there will arise a kind of joy or delight. That's the mark of piti. Okay, so the 6th pakinika, the 6th miscellaneous factor, is the Pali word here is chanda, which means or translated desire. But this is not the desire that we usually think of as craving. This is different from craving. This is a kind of, remember, it's a variable factor. So this kind of desire is simply the desire to act. That is, the desire to perform an action or to achieve some result. So it doesn't necessarily imply craving or greed, but say you want to study a particular Buddhist text, so then you go to the library and you take that copy of the book or you buy a copy of the book, or you find it on the internet. So that desire to study that text, that is chanda. And as you're studying, the desire to understand it, to learn more, that is desire. Or if you start a business, the desire for the business to succeed, manifestation of chanda. And of course, in unwholesome conscious states of mind, the desire to plunder other people to get rich, the wish to plunder is greed, but that is greed or craving. But the desire that motivates the action, that will be the chanda. That would be unwholesome chanda, unwholesome desire. So unwholesome desire and greed or craving go together in the unwholesome chittas, but they're different factors. Okay, so we say here that this kind of desire should be distinguished from the reprehensible kind of desire, which is called lobha, greed, raga, lust, or tanha, craving. So greed, lust, craving, that's always unwholesome. But chanda changes its quality depending on the kind of citta or mental state of mind in which it arises. Okay, so this takes us through now the 6 variable factors, or the 6 miscellaneous factors. And so now we've covered the 7 universals and the 6 miscellaneous, which make up the 13 ethically variable factors. So now I'll just ask whether there's any questions, any simple questions on these factors. Yes, please. Yeah, there's the microphone. Yeah.
I'm probably missing something fundamental here, but the stretching forth of the mind's hand toward the object, in terms of chanda, how does that fit into the minded birding doors of the consciousness that we discussed previously, where the mind moves, kind of inclines itself toward an object? Or are they totally unrelated?
No, you see, the chittas perform various functions.
Right.
And they perform various functions by reason of the mental factors present within those chittas. Mm-hmm. So we would say that in this case, it's the desire to act, which is
within that citta.
Yeah, it's a mental factor within that citta that's responsible for that citta performing that particular function.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other?
I have a question.
Yeah. Who is speaking and where? Oh, okay.
Yeah. For the chanda, if I have a craving for ice cream and I look for ice cream, is that act of looking chanda?
I would say that the act of looking, it's a very complex phenomena. So there are many, many chaitasikas or mental factors involved in that. Okay, let us take the case you have the desire for ice cream. Okay, then you don't have any ice cream in your house, so you go out to, was it Baskin Robbins or Dairy Queen, whatever. Okay, so so you make a decision to go out to get ice cream. Okay, so there's the craving for the ice cream, that's greed. There's the desire to get the ice cream, so that is the chanda. Okay, then there is the decision, in this case, decision to go out. You could think, on the other hand, say, you have the desire for ice cream. That's the greed arising in the mind, but it's a cold, rainy day, and the Baskin Robbins, the nearest one, is 6 blocks away. Then you think, nah, I don't want to go out in the cold rain. So then your decision is to stay back. So then, in that case, your desire, you could say your desire to remain comfortable in your house or your apartment is stronger than your desire to go out to get the ice cream. I think, could you to use the microphone if you...
So it's still considered as ethically variables then?
Yeah, in the case when the craving for the ice cream arises, then the desire becomes unwholesome. I mean, it's normal to have desire for ice cream, but... Chris? Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, that's fine.
When we put Adhimokkha with Manasikara, when we put these two words together, is it different meaning with Adhimokkha? Is that right?
Yeah, they seem so close that I have to admit that I have difficulty distinguishing them. But the way I would understand is Manasikara, that's attention, is sort of a more basic factor which simply turns the mind to the object. Whereas Adhimokkha, decision, makes, we say, some decision regarding how one is going to deal with the object. Yeah, but they seem in some ways very, very close. It's sometimes very difficult to distinguish them. So, at the micro, let's say at the micro level, the level of the individual cittas, it's difficult to distinguish them. But we could see, if we take examples from our everyday life, we could see their functions at a grosser level, which help us to see what's going on at the micro level. So attention would be, for example, if I'm, say, reading a book and then there's a loud noise outside, then I turn, what's going on? What caused that loud noise? That is attention, manasikara, turning to the new object. Whereas we could see decision, as I mentioned in the example, going into the tea shop and looking at various teas and pondering which tea to buy and then making that decision. Okay, Ben.
Venerable, I was wondering, could you give an example of using the desire that doesn't come from craving as a starting point? Because one was a craving for ice cream.
Okay.
How would the desire work?
Okay, so we would say some wholesome forms of desire. It would say desire to advance in one's learning of Buddha Dharma, desire to attend a meditation retreat, desire to maybe perform some kind of service at the monastery. Those would be kinds of wholesome desire.
Wouldn't have any craving in them.
Of course, they could be craving, like, I want to learn this so that I could become a Dharma lecturer. So elements of craving can come in, but one has to, examine one's own mind and then sort of subdue and dispel those thoughts of craving that arise and generate a wholesome motivation for those pursuits. Ooh, okay. Okay, can we go on now to now we come to the unwholesome mental factors. And the Pali Abhidhamma system distinguishes 14 unwholesome factors. And in the suttas, we meet many kinds of unwholesome mental qualities are mentioned. But one of the things that the Abhidhamma does is to sort of collate or connect synonyms for the different unwholesome mental factors. Okay, so let us first read them together. First we'll take the title of this section, Akusala Chaitasika, Moho, Ahirikang, Anotappang, Udachang, Lobo, Ditti, Mano, Doso, Isa, Macharyang, Kukuchang, Tinang, Midang, Vichikicha, Chati, Chudasime, Chaitasika, Akusala Nama. Okay, of these 14 unwholesome chaitasikas, 4 of them are considered to be common to all unwholesome states of mind, all unwholesome chittas. That is the first 4 here. Delusion, shamelessness, fearlessness of wrongdoing, and restlessness. So these are present in all the unwholesome chittas. And so the first of these is moha, which is what we translate delusion. And this is a synonym for ignorance. Ignorance is, in Pali, avijja, Sanskrit avidya. And another word that's used in the text for moha or avijja is Unyanang. Unyanang is the absence of jnana, of knowledge or understanding. And so its characteristic is mental blindness or lack of correct knowledge. And its function is to conceal the real nature of things. So moha, as we'll say, it's not the same as wrong view. But moha is like maybe a mist or a cloud that covers up the real nature of things so that we don't see things and understand things as they really are. And so it's manifested as the absence of right understanding or as mental darkness. And its proximate cause is said to be unwise attention. And then it's said that moha, delusion, should be seen as the root of all that is unwholesome. If you remember when we studied the unwholesome chittas, I said that there are the unwholesome chittas rooted in greed, but in those chittas we also have delusion. Then there are the 2 chittas rooted in hatred or aversion. Also, delusion is also present in those 2. And then the delusion sort of stands out more clearly in the 2 chittas rooted in delusion. That's the chitta accompanied by doubt and the chitta accompanied by restlessness. Okay, now we come to two factors which are very closely connected with each other. They always go together, but there's a difference in their mode of operation. And they're best understood by way of the positive qualities that they negate. Okay, so these two are, the Pali words are ahirika and anotappa. So ahirika is the absence of hiri. Anotappa is the absence of otappa. I know these are quite commonly mentioned in Chinese too, even in ordinary everyday talk. If somebody does something wrong, they say they don't have can kui, right? I don't know if I get the tones right. Can is third tone. Second of can. Kui, fourth. Kui. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me explain the positive qualities, then we could understand the unwholesome by the negation. So the quality of hiri is absence of disgust, or let's say disgust. Okay, the absence of disgust at bodily and verbal misconduct. And now we translate hiri as the sense, I use the rendering, the sense of moral shame, but that's not perfectly adequate. I think there is maybe it's very hard to find an English word that exactly corresponds to hiri, because we think of shame as something that arises after one commits an unwholesome deed. Then one looks back at it, one feels shame over it or regret over it. But hiri is the mental factor that prevents one from committing some unwholesome deed. So it's a factor that arises before, when there's a temptation to commit some unwholesome deed. And then hiri steps in and prevents one from committing that deed. And the way hiri prevents one from committing that deed is by considering one's own sense of self-respect, or I would say the sense of one's own inner dignity. One reflects that if I were to commit such a deed, I would be in some way losing my sense of self-respect, or I would be tarnishing or defiling my sense of inner dignity. So to preserve one's self-respect, to preserve one's inner dignity, one refrains from committing that unwholesome deed. So that is hiri. And when one lacks that sense of shame, that sense of self-respect, or one just sort of pushes it to the side and one goes ahead and commits that bodily and verbal misconduct, that is ahirika, here translated shamelessness. Okay, now anotappa is the absence of otappa. Otappa is fear of wrongdoing, or I've also used the rendering moral dread. And this is fear not because of one's sense of self-respect, but it's fear of the consequences of wrongdoing. So one considers that if I commit this wrong deed and others find out about me, then they might blame me, criticize me, ridicule me. Or if it's a really severe, heavy, unwholesome deed, like stealing, bribery, even killing, then the authorities, the legal authorities, if I'm found out, then I can be arrested and imprisoned. And then if one has the view of karma and its results, then one reflects, well, even if I escape blame by my friends in this life, even if I escape the legal authorities, but I don't escape the karma. The karma follows me everywhere. So even the Buddhists, there's a verse in the Dhammapada that says, even if you go to a desert island or hide in a mountain cave, you can't escape the result of your karma. It'll find you there. Okay, so this is fear of the consequences. Okay, so somebody who doesn't have that fear of consequences, has this kind of audacity, a moral audacity, to commit wrong, thinking, I'll get away with it. Nobody's going to find out. And this karma business, it's just an Eastern superstition. Some kind of mystical idea. Okay, so when these two, we have shamelessness or lack of self-respect and lack of moral dread, fearlessness of wrongdoing, when those come together, then they sort of open the gateway to doing unwholesome things, even thinking unwholesome thoughts. And they are manifest as not shrinking away from evil. Okay, then the fourth common or universal unwholesome mental factor is restlessness or uddhacca. So this has the characteristic, actually these terms really just seem like synonyms. It has the characteristic of disquietude. So when the mind is not quiet, not calm, not peaceful, but it's excited or agitated, that is the manifestation of restlessness. And it's compared to water which has been stirred up by the wind, and its function is to make the mind unsteady, the way the wind will make a banner ripple, and it appears as inner turmoil, though that is a strong manifestation. But even in very subtle, unwholesome mental states, there's always some degree of uddhacca, restlessness present. So even when I'm thinking those fantasies about the vanilla fudge ice cream, there's some sort of restlessness there. Or if I'm thinking a little bit angry because somebody said something rude to me, there's some restlessness there. Okay, so now we come to the other unwholesome mental factors, which are not constant unwholesome mental factors. Okay, so the first of these is greed. So we've already looked at greed in the 8 chittas rooted in greed. And here, though we use the word greed, but we have to understand that the word lobha, the Pali word, it covers all degrees of selfish desire. So greed is a very strong manifestation I want to get rich on the stock market. I want to get power and influence in politics. I want to get praise from others or fame. So those are strong manifestations of greed. But even, we could say, like subtle manifestations, like I pass a beautiful flower, I think, let me just smell the fragrance of that flower, and I lean over and enjoy it. Ah, how delightful. So we could say, it's not committing anything that's morally wrong by that act, but it's a subtle manifestation of greed. Okay, its characteristic is grasping an object. Its function is sticking the way meat sticks to a hot frying pan. And it's manifested as not giving up, and its proximate cause is seeing enjoyment in things that lead to bondage. I wanted to get to give you some example of how the Abhidhamma text okay. How it will give a long string of synonyms for one particular word. Like greed. Okay, here is, I'll read out the meanings. So there are too many words in Pali for greed. We don't have so many words in English. Okay, so it's saying, here, what is greed? That which is lust, passion, favoring, leaning towards, delight in lust, mental passion, wish, infatuation, adherence. Geta is again almost like greed. Paligeta again like greed. Sanko is a bond. Punko is a swamp. Aja is commotion. Maya, strange, is usually Maya is like hypocrisy. It's strange that it's there. Janika is the producer. Sipani is the seamstress, that which ties one down. Jalani is the web or the net, not the internet, not the World Wide Web. Visatika is like attachment. Sutta is a thread. Visata is like bondage. Panidi is inclination. Bhavaneti is what leads to existence. Vana is the woods. Vanato is a jungle. Santava is intimacy. Sineya is affection. Apeka is concern. Patibandho is again like bondage. Asa, desire. So just you could see like many words that occur in the text are sort of united and brought together under this word lobha. Okay, so this is greed. Then we come to the next is ditthi. Ditthi is what we translate, literally it's view. So we can have samaditthi, which is right view, and micchaditthi, which is wrong view. But when the Abhidhamma uses the word ditthi, then almost always it means wrong view. So it's explained as seeing wrongly. And it's sort of its characteristic is that it's an unwise or unjustified interpretation of things. I just want to find some synonyms. Okay, so for view, the Abhidhamma text gives view, going to views, the jungle of views, the wilderness of views, the vacillation of views, the trembling of views, the fetter of views, the grip, the obsession, the adherence, the misapprehension, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then the text, usually the sutta text will enumerate various kinds of wrong views, like the most powerful kind of wrong view or the most unwholesome kind of wrong view is the wrong view that says that there is no result of good and bad deeds, that the deeds don't generate a karmic force that will bring their fruits or results in the future. So therefore, that if one kills and steals and plunders and commits sexual misconduct, there's no harm, no demerit is created. If one practices giving, observing precepts, helping others and so forth, one doesn't generate or create any merit. So that is considered strong forms of wrong views. Okay, the next unwholesome mental factor is conceit. And conceit is said that it has the characteristic of haughtiness. So it seems to me maybe haughtiness is a strong form of conceit. But conceit can take much subtler forms, just subtly thinking, like thoughts, very subtle kinds of self-exaltation. And the commentaries, actually the sutta text as well, speak of three kinds of conceit. One is called the superiority conceit. When we use the English word conceit, we almost always think that it means one considers oneself better than others. But the Buddhist texts, even the suttas, lay out three kinds of conceit. So the first is the superiority conceit. I am better than they are. But then there is called the same as conceit. I am just as good as they are. I'm the same as they are. They're not better than me. That's the conceit my mother always tried to instill in me. You're just as good as they are. Never think down about yourself. Never think lowly about yourself. And then the third kind of conceit is the inferiority conceit. So even thinking, oh, I'm a hopeless case. Everybody is understanding this Abhidhamma business, but I'm sitting here, I can't make out a thing that he's saying. There must be something wrong with me. My mind is like a block of cement, nothing gets in. Okay, so that is the inferiority conceit. But they're all, according to the Buddhist texts, They're different modes or manifestations, but they come from the same mental factor. Okay, then we come to the unwholesome chaitasika called dosa, which we translate as hatred. But again, we have to say that what we call dosa comprises all degrees and kinds of aversion. So when we use the word hatred, we think of something really strong that just overwhelms the mind so that you can't control the mind anymore. But even when we feel a little bit resentment towards another person, a little bit of ill will towards them, or we get a little bit angry, like I trip on the step, when going off the curb, and then I think, why did they have to put this curb here? And I get angry at the curb or angry at the people who put the curb there. That's also a manifestation of dosa. So it's said its characteristic is ferocity, but that's only the really strong manifestation. But it occurs, at these light and subtle levels, and then it can gradually build up strength until it becomes overwhelming hatred. Okay, the next factor is in Pali isa, which is envy. And this has the characteristic of being envious or jealous of others' success, or I would say also of the good qualities or possessions of others. So others, maybe somebody succeeds in their exams, and I don't succeed, I don't do as well, so I'm envious of them. Or somebody has a Tesla electric car, and I have an ordinary, what is ordinary cars? Toyota or Honda. And they're my neighbor, and they pull in very proudly in their Tesla, and I have to pull in my low-grade 1975 Honda, and then I'm envious of their success. Or somebody has very good qualities. Somebody could even sit in meditation for 3 hours without moving, and myself, after 15 minutes, I'm squirming around. And then I feel envious of their quality, of their good qualities. Okay, and then what's often sort of somewhat similar to envy, or actually maybe the counterpart of envy, is macharya. Here it's translated avarice, but sometimes avarice can be thought of as strong greed. So I think a better rendering what I would use now would be miserliness. Here, in other words, stinginess. And so this is not wanting to share one's possessions with others. And so if I'm very wealthy, or even if I have a moderate degree of wealth, then I don't want to give in charity. I don't want to help others. Probably the paradigm or paragon of this miserliness is in Charles Dickens' Christmas, is it Christmas Tale? Christmas Story. Scrooge, Scrooge the miser, who never wanted to give, to help anybody when Christmas came around. But he would always think everybody should take care of themselves. I've worked hard for my wealth. they should work hard if they want to get some benefits. And also, even in monastic life, the Buddha mentions 5 kinds of macharya. So let me see if I could think of them offhand. I didn't prepare this part in advance. So there's miserliness regarding dwellings. So one doesn't want to offer, say, a visiting monk or nun a dwelling place in one's monastery. Does anybody remember what they are offhand? Dwellings? Yeah, that is the last one. But, excuse me? Yeah. Offerings. I'll get them. Yeah, Dhamma or knowledge, I think it was the last one. Oh, it's the words of the text are very stern. Possessing 5 qualities, a resident monk is deposited in hell as if brought there. He is miserly with regard to dwellings, to dwelling place, miserly with regard to families. What this means, that sort of in the Buddha's day, like a monk or a monastery would have families of supporters, and so if a visitor comes or a new monk comes to live in the monastery, he doesn't want to introduce his family of supporters to the new monk because he wants to keep them for himself so that he gets all the support from those families. Then comes being miserly with regard to gains, those are the offerings. And then miserly with regard to praise. Actually, I don't think this is the complete list because the 5th is different here. Okay, so this is when you yourself don't want to praise others. So somebody does something very good, and normally we would say, oh, that was wonderful, we really appreciated that. But you don't want to boost up the ego of anybody else because you want to be number one, so you don't praise the others. Then the 5th would be miserliness regarding Dhamma. Yeah, this is the list that has Dhamma. Yeah, with regard to dwellings, families, gains, praise, and Dhamma. This is, if one has knowledge of Dhamma, then one doesn't want to teach it, or one teaches it with some reservations, because one doesn't want other people to learn Dhamma so that they will become accomplished teachers of Dhamma. You want to always be the number one teacher. Okay, the next unwholesome mental factor is, here it's given, this translation, not good, worry. Rather, I would translate it as remorse or regret. That is, when one does something wrong, and then afterwards there's a kind of scratching on the mind, even like a sense of guilt, though it doesn't have to be as heavy as this oppressive sense of guilt, but just some kind of disturbance in the mind that I've done something wrong. And so its function is to sorrow over the wrong that has been done or the good that was not done. And it's manifested as remorse. Okay, now, I should say, in my opinion, that there's a good kind of remorse. When one does something wrong, one recognizes that it's wrong, and then one sort of makes a decision to make amends for it, like to apologize to somebody, or in one's own mind to make this kind of repentance for it. But this is a kind of persistent, I call it a mental scratching, that prevents the mind from settling down and becoming calm and peaceful. A kind of constant regret, constant reminder that I did what was wrong, or I failed to do what was right and necessary. Okay, the next is, actually these two, 12 and 13, are very closely related. Yes?
I was just wondering if this type of worry, to me it contradicts, it's probably my understanding, the shamelessness. Because if you have that worry, it would suggest that you're not totally shameless. And that I would speculate that the worrying about misdeed must, at some level, have a fearfulness of wrongdoing. So
what I would say is that the shamelessness, as I said, precedes the wrong act. So it means that one is not restrained out of a sense of shame. But so one goes ahead and commits the wrong act,
and then worries about it.
Then one considers about it. Then one turns back and considers it. Then one has this regret or remorse.
Okay, but I'll say if I can say one more thing. Yeah. It seems like what you just described there, I was thinking it before, could be a developmental process of developing a better sense of conscience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the unwholesomeness could be a stage for developing.
Yeah, I say that there's like a wholesome kind of remorse, which is that when one does something wrong, one recognizes it, and then one tries to make amends for it, or at least one makes a determination not to repeat it. In fact, we have that in the Buddhist monastic discipline. If one sort of transgresses the training precept, then one is supposed to, if it's a lesser precept, to make a confession, and then one makes the resolve not to repeat it in the future. Okay, let's finish the unwholesome factors before taking questions. Okay, so we have these two, translated here, sloth and torpor, which are very, very closely associated. I think they always go together, never separated. But there's a slight difference in their characteristic or the way they function. Okay, so sloth I would call dullness or sluggishness of the mind. So it's a heaviness of the mind, you could say, a sinking of the mind. I compare this sort of imagistically. It's like, suppose we have a bright sunny day. That's like a clear mind. And then these heavy clouds sort of blow in, and then they stop, and you get the sky covered, not with these distinct clouds, but with this heavy sort of this extensive mass of just gray clouds, indistinguishable clouds. So that is like that sloth, this dullness, stiffness, sluggishness of the mind. Then mida, translated here as torpor, I would call this now the drowsiness. But it's not the natural sort of sleepiness that comes in when one reaches, the normal bedtime. But during the day, maybe early morning, you wake up bright and bright and active, and then maybe you're meditating or studying the Dhamma book, and then the mind starts to get heavy and dull. Okay, that's Tina coming in, and then before you know it, you're sort of nodding off. That's torpor or drowsiness. So it said its function is to smother. It is manifested as drooping or as nodding and sleepiness. I'm trying to test myself, so we have 13 unwholesome factors. What didn't we cover? Yeah, I don't. Okay, I'll have to cheat. Of course. Doubt. Okay, so as I explained when we discussed the doubting consciousness, so this is what I would call like spiritual doubt or skeptical doubt. And it's understood as the inability to place confidence in, for a Buddhist, from a Buddhist perspective, the inability to place confidence or trust in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So its function is to waver. So when there's doubt, the mind wavers. Is the Buddha enlightened or not enlightened? Is the Dharma true, not true? And so on. So it's manifested as this indecisiveness. Okay, so that takes us to the unwholesome factors. And one thing that I notice about the unwholesome factors, if we just look at them together, it seems to me that we could divide these into two categories, or two classes. One I would call the moral defects, or moral blemishes. So these would be defilements in the strong sense. So I would put in that category, and this is my own opinion, I haven't found this in the commentaries, I would put in that category shamelessness, fearlessness of wrongdoing, greed, conceit, hatred, envy, avarice. Yeah, those. Let me put a little mark by them. Okay, shamelessness, fearlessness, greed, conceit, hatred, envy, avarice or miserliness. Okay, then the second category would be those unwholesome mental qualities that are not really moral taints as such, but that are obstructions to the development of the mind, that sort of impede or block progress in the way of, especially the progress along the path of developing samadhi and wisdom. So these would be, I'll use a line rather than a dot for those. Restlessness, regret or worry, sloth, torpor, and doubt, and then I'll say that, or I would say that delusion and wrong view can fit into both sides, fall into both classes. Okay, I'll ask now whether we have any questions on any of the unwholesome mental factors. And I want to say, before I ask the questions, I want to say, this is again my opinion, like these particular factors are what have been selected out by the Pali or Theravada Abhidhamma. Almost certainly, if one sort of goes into the suttas and starts selecting the different unwholesome qualities mentioned by the Buddha in the suttas, you'll be able to find other factors which don't fit so neatly into under these headings. And so one could probably construct another Abhidhamma system with different grouping of unwholesome mental factors. Yeah, so, okay, please.
Going back to wrong view, number 6.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there are 3 categories: feeling superior, feeling inferior.
That's conceit, not wrong view.
Conceit.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, number 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Continuing with that, there are 3 categories of feeling superior, feeling inferior, and feeling the same as others. So I understand how the first 2 are unwholesome or unhelpful, but kind of like your mother, what is the, how is it delusional or unhelpful, the view that everyone is the same?
Yeah, I mean, in certain ways you could say that it's good to think that everybody is the same, but I think what's common to all 3 forms of conceit is that, and what makes them forms of conceit, is that they're revolving around the idea of I. You know, so that they're taking the I to be a reality, but not, it's in a different mode from wrong view. Like there's the wrong view about the self, that I have a substantial, some kind of substantial inner self. So, but that view of self involves a heavier layer of conceptualization and sort of speculative reflection, whereas conceit is something which is more spontaneous, but what characterizes all 3 forms is the center of them is I am this.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my question is about envy.
Yeah.
I was thinking sometimes we all feel that we have envy but without aversion. So I look at that as admiration.
As what?
As admiration. Admiration.
Admiration.
Yeah.
Admiration. Yeah.
So I was wondering, is that considered unwholesome too?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Because, right, that's just like it's like envy but without aversion.
Yeah,
right?
no, I don't know where to fit admiration into the Abhidhamma system. But I would say of course it depends on, maybe this is a reason it's not included, is it depends on who one is admiring. Yeah, because one could admire the bad people for their success, and you could admire the good people, the noble people, for their nobility. Yeah. So it doesn't fit neatly into this particular scheme of mental qualities, but it's certainly, I say it's an important mental quality. Okay, yes, please.
Hi, thank you for taking our questions and being here. On number 12 and 13, sloth and torpor, at the bottom it says that sloth is a citta and torpor is a mental factor. Could you expound on that at all?
No, sloth, let me just see.
The bottom of page 84. Down below.
Oh, okay. It says that it said sloth is identified as sickness of consciousness, and torpor as sickness of the mental factors. You see, sloth on this explanation, it's a separate cetasika. It's not the citta, but it's a quality of the citta. In this case, the sickness of the citta, whereas torpor is a kind of sickness, but it's the sickness of the mental factors. That's what this says, and this is taken from a commentary, but I don't like this explanation, by the way. Because it seems to me that both sloth and torpor, I see them as pertaining to the whole citta, sort of qualities of the citta, not dividing one to the citta, one to the other mental factors. Doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you.
Is it Yuan? Okay.
Venerable, I noticed that for a few of the unwholesome mental factors, the proximate cause is unwise attention.
Yeah.
So that seems quite important. Would you please say a few words to clarify that?
Yeah. The text, this is the sutta text, speak often about a distinction between two modes of attention. One is unwise attention. In Pali, this is ayoniso manasikara. I think our translator, she will know that there's a standard Chinese translation of that. Ayoniso buruli soe, is that? Buruli zoi. Okay, so unwise attention or careless attention or superficial attention. And then the opposite of that on the wholesome side is what we could translate it wise attention, careful attention, or thorough attention. So the attention here, it's not identical with the attention as a single mental factor. So this unwise attention, wise attention, can't be reduced to single mental factors or cetasikas, but rather these are mental processes, ways of considering things. So if one considers things unwisely or superficially in terms of their surface appearance, that is the unwise attention. And that is often like the stimulus for greed or conceit or wrong views and other unwholesome states to arise. Whereas wise attention, that is the strong condition for the arising of wisdom, especially for the arising of wisdom, thorough and careful attention. Okay, maybe if there's one more question, then I'll take it, because I want to take the wholesome mental factors. Okay, please, yeah.
Just following up on that question.
Yeah.
Following up on that question that you just answered, where it says under restlessness that its proximate cause is unwise attention to mental disquiet. So is that saying that the unwise attention is directed to that particular quality?
I have to say this doesn't make good sense to me.
Okay.
These explanations were just sort of taken from the Visuddhimagga, path of purification, and a work called the Attasalini, that's the Abhidhamma commentary that gives explanations. Sometimes they don't make such good sense. Okay, let us go to the wholesome. Oh, actually, these are called the beautiful factors. And the reason why they're called the beautiful factors and not the wholesome factors is because, if you remember, we have the beautiful cittas, which can be wholesome, and also there are beautiful resultants and beautiful functional cittas. So these beautiful mental factors can be present in all three of these classes: the beautiful wholesome, the beautiful resultants, and the beautiful functionals. Okay, first, the beautiful factors are divided into universal beautiful factors, and then there are a number of other beautiful factors that are present only under particular circumstances or in certain types of cittas. Okay, so there are 25 beautiful factors, and of these, 19 are considered universal beautiful factors. So the Pali designation is Sobhana Sadharana. Okay, so we'll recite them together. Okay, Saddha, Sati, Hiri, Ottappa, Alobo, Adoso, Tatra Majjatatta, Kaya Pasaddi, Chitta Pasaddi, Kaya Lahuta, Chitta Lahuta, Kaya Muduta, Chitta Muduta, Kaya Kamyata, Chitta Kamyata, Kaya Pagunyata, Chitta Pagunyata, Kai Ujukata, Chit Ujukata, Chati, Ekuna Visat Ime, Chaitasika, Sobhana Sadharana Nama. Okay, so the first of these is faith. And so faith is said to have the characteristic of placing faith or of trusting. That would be placing trust in, we would say, in a spiritual teacher or spiritual teachings or spiritual practice. And it's to be noted that faith is said to be present in all wholesome cittas. So again, I mean, that to me it seems to be evident that this Abhidhamma scheme has been fashioned with the particular aims and undertakings of the Buddha's path in mind. Like, let's say a person is an atheist or an agnostic who has no belief at all in any kind of spiritual teaching. Maybe they're a physicist or who says, I see no evidence for anything transcending the level of physical reality. But they could be a good person, and so they're generous to the unfortunate. They give to a lot of charities. They're very helpful and kind. What to make of that? If you say, then you must have faith, they'll say, no, I don't believe. Of course, as in the Christian countries say, I don't believe in God. If it's in a physicist from a Buddhist family, say in a Buddhist country, who, because of their scientific training and what they see in popular Buddhism, so they say, Buddhism is just for, the ordinary people. Sort of, I don't really see any evidence for it, scientific evidence. And yet, again, they're very generous, kind, and helpful. So you say, you must have faith. So they'll say, no, I don't believe in karma, I don't believe in rebirth. But then you could say, well, you must have faith in the intrinsic value of doing good deeds. So you say, well, if you define faith in that way, okay. But that's a very different definition of faith than the faith of, say, the Buddhist peasant who goes to the temple every Sunday to listen to the Dhamma sermon and who makes offerings of incense and flowers to his little Buddha image at home and recites the virtues of the triple gem every day. So if you call them both faith, it seems a little bit like stretching the word faith. Okay. And this is interesting that the Theravada Abhidhamma puts mindfulness present in all beautiful states of consciousness, but mindfulness is not present in the unwholesome states of consciousness. Okay, this is where I've brought up my questions that none of my Abhidhamma specialist friends have really answered to my satisfaction. Forgive me for the rather violent simile that I'm going to use. We have a hired assassin, let us say in a we call a third world country. He's hired to assassinate the president of that country. Okay, he goes about this operation meticulously. Every step he performs with thorough attention to the step. And he looks around, he goes up to a high point, maybe on the hill, looks around very carefully, very attentively, picks up his assault rifle, and then when the presidential procession passes by, shoots, and then very attentively puts the rifle away and disposes of it, and then blends into the crowd, even mindfully or attentively feigning, oh, what a terrible thing happened, oh, I hope he'll be all right. Can we say that that's not mindfulness? Yeah.
But he totally missed the mental factors that were causing him to focus on these things and to do that type of activity. So he has a kind of concentration and focus, but he's totally lost sight of the unwholesome mental factors in his mind. So
but those factors are there, and it seems he's doing all of this mindfully with those unwholesome factors present.
No, if he was totally mindful, he would not have followed through on those.
I don't know about that.
Unwholesome.
And what's interesting also, if we look at the sutta texts, there are like suttas which say, I will teach you the wrong way and the right way. So what is the wrong way? Wrong view, and wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong bodily action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, wrong concentration. Then the right factors, all the same, from right view to right concentration. But then the Abhidhamma, or the commentaries, the Theravada commentaries say, wrong mindfulness means the absence of mindfulness. But it seems to me that that assassin acted with perfect mindfulness. Yeah.
it seems to me that there's an inherent, I don't want to use the word bias, but a very humanistic perspective in all of this that values an open-heartedness, that values what they call wholesomeness.
Yeah, of course.
And that the mindfulness is an open-heartedness to improve our capacity and functioning in understanding how interconnected we are. And so if someone uses attention for murdering another person, I would have to say, right, that would be wrong mindfulness.
Okay, when I'm doing my walking meditation, I'm not really focusing on open-heartedness very much or interconnectedness. I'm just being attentive to right step, left step, right step, left step. When I get to the end of the walkway, to the wall, mindfully, let's say, put the word mindfulness away. Attentively, I'm turning around, walking back, right step, left step, right step, left step. When the assassin is going to the hilltop to find his perch, he's going up there, looking around, attentive, even attentive to each step, right step, left step, right step, left step. Okay, we could go on discussing this for hours. I want to get through. We still have 23 more beautiful factors. We could, yeah. You have the last comment.
So for these universal beautiful factors, right, they result in, like, there's a resultant karma. So it's like, if let's say because of the mindfulness of of the assassin, he gets his results. So
he'll get because of the assassination, he'll get the unwholesome results.
But the assassination is unwholesome result, but the mindfulness gave him the result of that person.
You could say, when he's acting with mindfulness, then he's acting with a wholesome state of mind. But I can't say that going to commit an assassination, he's acting with a wholesome state of mind.
Because
okay. As I said, we could debate this for another hour. I want to get through all of these factors in 10 minutes. Okay, so let us see how the text explains mindfulness. So the word mindfulness originally comes from the verb sariti, which means to remember. But as a mental factor, what it signifies in the usual context in Buddhism is presence of mind, attentiveness to the present, rather than the faculty of memory about the past. So its characteristic is not wobbling, that is, not floating away from the object. Its function is non-forgetfulness. It's manifested as guardianship. Not clear what that means. Okay, then we see it in the Buddhist context. The mindfulness appears sort of most clearly in the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. But even when, say, if I give food to a hungry person or take the precepts, even then those are wholesome states of mind, so mindfulness will be present. Okay, we've already discussed shame, or what I call the inner sense of the sense of inner dignity or self-respect, and fear of wrongdoing. Okay, then non-greed has the characteristic of the mind's lack of desire or craving for an object. Its function is not to lay hold. It's manifested as detachment. In what's said in some of the commentaries is that non-greed covers a wide range that extends from simply the absence of greed, say in a wholesome state of consciousness. Again, say when I'm doing my walking meditation, just being mindful of walking back and forth, then because it's a wholesome state, so non-greed is present, but there it's sort of present minimally as simply the absence of greed. But if, say, I'm going about making offerings to poor people, then non-greed is sort of the motivating factor there, and now it's taken on a much stronger form as expressed as generosity. And similarly, analogous with non-hatred, so non-hatred has the characteristic of, let us say simply the lack of any kind of ill will, aversion, annoyance, irritation, and so on. And so that is the minimal degree of non-hatred, but it's said that non-hatred on the more positive side of the scale, it will comprise such qualities as loving kindness, friendliness, helpfulness towards others, gentleness. And then it's said that that it's non-hatred that appears among the four sublime abodes, the Brahma Viharas, or immeasurable qualities. So it's non-hatred that appears as the sublime quality of loving kindness. And then it has the characteristic of wishing for the welfare of living beings, desiring their welfare. Okay, neutrality of mind, tatra majatata literally means being there in the middle. And this is a synonym for equanimity or upekkha, not the neutral feeling. We met the word upekkha earlier as a feeling present in certain cittas. But here, neutrality of mind means equanimity as this beautiful quality of inner balance, detachment, aversion is arising in my mind for a moment. Okay. I was losing my neutrality of mind. Okay. So it has this characteristic of conveying consciousness and the mental factors evenly. So it prevents partiality, and it's similar, it's illustrated by that of a charioteer who is driving a chariot, and when the horses are proceeding evenly, then the charioteer can just look on evenly on the horses without having to either stir them on or to slow them down. And then this neutrality of mind becomes the fourth Brahma Vihara, that of equanimity towards living beings, that is looking upon all beings equally without preferences. And so it could also be seen as freedom from discrimination, that absence of preferences and prejudices, but looking upon all equally. Okay, the next 12 factors fall into 6 groups, 6 pairs, and it's said that they apply, one term appears to body, the other to the citta. Then the commentaries explain what is the body here is the mental body. But I have to say, this seems rather strange to me. I have a suspicion that it originally meant applying to the physical body, and then the Abhidhamma commentaries took it to apply to what they call the mental body, the other Chaitasikas. So I say, let's not be so concerned with the distinction of, say, citta, passaddhi, tranquility of mind, tranquility of body, but just take the 6 qualities themselves. So one is tranquility, So in all wholesome states of mind, there's a certain degree of calmness, an absence of disturbance, a certain peacefulness and coolness in the mind. So that is tranquility. And also all wholesome states of mind have a certain lightness to them. You could consider the unwholesome states. When an unwholesome state of mind arises, there's a kind of mental heaviness. And maybe sometimes you could see your feeling when you've maybe been burdened with a lot of worries and concerns. Then if you come into your meditation room or before the altar, and then you bow down to the Buddha and just sit and focus the mind on agreeable object, the mind becomes light. So that would be the lightness of the mind. The absence, the subsiding of this heaviness. Then we have malleability, mudita, which means like a softness of the mind. The absence of rigidity, sort of a soft, gentle quality in the mind. Then the next is wieldiness, kamanyata, which means that the mind becomes easy to work with, that one could apply the mind without having to struggle to get the mind to perform its tasks. So the mind becomes wieldy, workable. And then in performing its task, it becomes proficient. That is the next pair. So there's a kind of efficiency or proficiency, increased or enhanced capacity in performing its task. Okay, and then the next pair is called rectitude, which is the meaning of uju literally is straightness. And maybe we could think of this as an integrity, that there's a certain integrity in the mind when performing wholesome deeds or generating wholesome states of mind. And so it's the opposite of a kind of tortuousness in the mind, a kind of crookedness in the mind in the unwholesome states. Okay, it's 5:30, so I'm going to have to pause here. And next time we will go through the we'll come to the other beautiful mental factors. And then we come to the interesting section, which deals with the way the different chaitasikas relate to the chittas. Okay, and remember I said if you have questions, you can write them down or bring them up next time. But first I'll go through finish the survey of the chaitasikas before we take the questions. Oh, we're going to do the sharing of the merits. So I think that there are these handouts that have the formula. Okay, so we share the merits with the Dhamma-protecting devas, the bhutas or fair spirits, the naga spirits, and so on. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavag upadaya avichihetato etantare satakayupapana rupya rupicha asanya sanyino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibbutiং